As I mentioned earlier, our guest Suzanne Bellnoun is president of the OAWD, the Organization of African Women in the Diaspora. The main objective of this organization is to combat the feeling of invisibility felt by these women, but also to oversee their actions on the continent in coordination with local organizations. She spoke to Laurent Soustras and Thierry Schiller.
Suzanne Bellnoun, hello.
Bonjour.
Welcome on Initiative Africa. You are the president of the Organization for African Women of the Diaspora. Can you briefly introduce your association?
Alors, l'Organisation des femmes africaines de la diaspora, c'est une plateforme.
The Organization for African Women of the Diaspora is a platform for African women entrepreneurs, association leaders and business executors. The organization was created in 2011.
L'organisation a été créée en 2011. L'objectif, c'est de donner de la visibilité aux actions.
The aim is to give visibility to the actions taken by women both in France and our home countries because we have long suffered from invisibility.
Alors, quelles sont ces actions?
So what are these actions? Hasn't it become very complicated in certain countries in West and Central Africa? I'm thinking of Burkina Faso, Mali and now Niger.
Mais l'intérêt pour nous, c'est de rester.
We have to remain in touch with women. It is essential for us because with all the sanctions hanging over their heads, it's tough for men.
Tombe sur la tête. Les premières à en souffrir, ce sont toujours les femmes.
The first to suffer are always the women and children. Let's not kid ourselves. So our mobilization, this bridge, this connection, is also to alleviate the risks.
Ça peut être matériel, ça peut être moral.
It can be material, it can be moral, but this network has an impact on women.
Sur les femmes.
Si je comprends bien, c'est le contact entre votre
The bond or connection that you've created between your association and local associations on the ground enables those actions to come to life.
En fait, c'est pas le FAD, mais nous sommes en contact avec les
Not the Organization for the African Women of the Diaspora, but we are in contact with local African networks because the members come from various countries and so we are told.
Les membres viennent de divers pays. Et donc, quand chacune nous dit, il y a une association.
There's an association of Senegalese in Morocco or an association from my country in Morocco. Let's connect with them to see their needs and what we can do.
Qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire?
Qu'est-ce que cette approche?
And what has this approach achieved so far? Is it working?
Mais les résultats sont très importants, très intéressants.
The results are very important and enlightening. We have an event that we have been running since 2014.
Depuis 2014.
The Economic Forum of African Women and Women of the Diaspora.
Et en 2019, nous l'avions transféré.
In 2019, we transferred it to Africa, specifically Cameroon. So it's an opportunity for African women and women from the diaspora to discuss, share, and see how far they can work together.
Travailler ensemble. C'est l'occasion aussi
It's also an opportunity for them to meet investors participating in these events.
Ces événements, des financiers, parce que c'est pas évident pour les femmes.
It's not easy for women, particularly African women, to find finance when they want to start a business.
Quand elles veulent entreprendre. Donc cet espace offre.
So this space, this platform offers that opportunity, and since 2014, we've seen a lot of results.
De résultats.
Et donc cette plateforme, ce rôle d'interface entre.
And so this platform, somehow an interface between the North and South, is working. What would you like to see improved?
Nous voulons l'amélioration que nous attendons.
We are hoping for improvement for institutions and decision makers to listen to us more because we hardly heard at all.
Un peu plus écoutés parce que nous ne sommes presque pas. Bon, ça vient doucement, timidement. Mais,
it's coming slowly, timidly, but the female diaspora is not taken into account when we talk about the diaspora.
N'est pas tellement prise en compte quand on parle de la diaspora. Et nous expliquons ça par le fait que.
And when we explain this by the fact that African women have always been seen as migrant women and seen as women who have come to reunite with their families and are therefore depending on their husbands.
Et donc, dépend le mari, on ne peut rien attendre d'elles économiquement, alors que c'est un tort.
We can't expect anything from them economically, which is absolutely wrong. There has been a real shift as more and more women are coming independently. These are women who've had a career in their own country. Unfortunately, when they arrive here, the experience is not being taken into account.
Malheureusement, quand elles arrivent ici, bon, c'est pas pris en compte. Et même les jeunes générations qui sont nées
And
ici,
even the younger generations who are born here, who have studied here, the same story with their mothers continues. They continue to be seen as
elles
that
continuent à
woman.
porter l'image de cette femme-là. Donc, nous attendons
So we're waiting for African women in the diaspora to be taken seriously
puissent être prises en compte dans les
in the
démarches.
political. Well, politics, it is starting to happen. Political and economic processes.
Qu'elles soient prises en compte. Et nous avons fait un travail
We've worked to do some advocacy through money transfers, so it was important for us to prove that African women in the diaspora are economic assets.
Apporter la preuve que la femme africaine de la diaspora est une force économique. Et ça ne
And
pouvait
that
se
could
faire
only
qu'à
be done
travers
through their contribution in terms
son
of money
apport en matière
transfers.
de transfert d'argent. Parce qu'on sait, vous savez bien que la diaspora aujourd'hui,
As you
c'est le
know,
premier
the
bailleur de
diaspora
fonds.
has been a significant source of funds for African countries, but when we tried to find out the contribution of women to these large sums of money transferred by the diaspora, it turned out that the institutions had never done an estimate.
Que la diaspora transfère, il s'est avéré que les institutions n'ont jamais fait ce travail. Et c'est avec
And with a great deal of determination, we were able to come up with these elements, which we are now using as advocacy tools.
aujourd'hui d'outils de plaidoyer.
Madame
Mrs.
Bellnoun, quel est
Bellnoun, what
votre
is your
parcours
background
et
and how did you
comment
come to
en êtes-vous
chair
venue à
the
présider la
OAWD
Association
Association?
Alors, mon parcours personnel est un peu atypique.
My
Comme la
background
plupart
is
des femmes
atypical.
africaines.
Like most African women, I was trained as a hotelier, so I worked as a general housekeeper for over 16 years.
Pendant plus de 16 ans dans l'hôtellerie de luxe en France.
In the luxury hotel industry in France, the Accor Group, Hyatt and Disney, at a certain point I considered myself privileged to hold positions of responsibility compared to the women I saw because I had to recruit my staff.
D'occuper des postes de responsabilité par rapport à celles que je voyais, puisque je t'amenais à recruter mon
When I found myself with quite educated, qualified women who came to apply as chambermaids,
comme femme de chambre avec un bagage.
and they were highly qualified.
Oui, diplômée. Et par la suite, après 16 ans, bon,
Yes, graduates. And then after 16 years, I got a bit fed up with being an employee and thought about setting up my own business.
À créer ma propre structure. Et dans ce parcours, j'ai vu le parcours du combattant, de la femme.
In the process, I saw the obstacles faced by African, migrant, and black women who want to set up their own business.
Noire qui veut créer une entreprise. À partir de là, j'ai commencé à comprendre.
From there, I began to understand why some women make do with very little.
Se contentaient de peu. Ça nous a interpellés et donc avec un certain nombre
It got to us, and so with several friends, we decided to set up this network.
Dans un premier temps, le but était d'aller chercher ces informations.
Initially, the aim was to find information we didn't think was available to us and share it with others who, like us, wanted to start their own business.
Qui, comme nous, voulait se mettre.
So we called it integration through business creation.
Par la création d'entreprises. Et donc, nous avons même eu à faire de la sensibilisation.
And we even had to do some awareness raising here at Château Rouge in Paris to inform women about how they can become entrepreneurs and what initiatives exist to help them out. So some followed.
Donc certaines ont suivi. Plus on découvrait.
The more we discovered the field realities, the more passionate we became about finding answers.
Des réponses par nous-mêmes.
Le profil des premières femmes africaines de la diaspora.
The profile of the first African women in the diaspora and that of young people, as well as the second or third generation of youth from the diaspora, are different.
Totalement différents. Quelle évolution avez-vous perçue? Comment faites-vous
What changes have you seen?
cette fusion en quelque sorte?
Ben, c'est ça qui fait la richesse de
That's what makes the Organization for African Women of the Diaspora so special. It's an intergenerational platform where everyone has something to contribute. Young people often try to help us adapt to new technologies because that's different from what we do.
Aux nouvelles technologies, hein, parce que nous, c'est pas. Et elles ont besoin de notre expérience.
And they need our experience, backgrounds, and learn from our journey, especially when they do business in our home countries.
Et surtout quand elles vont entreprendre dans nos pays d'origine.
Because young people are increasingly interested in going there, and they have been nicknamed the repats as opposed to expats. But when they go there, they don't understand the business codes.
Et quand elles doivent y aller, elles n'ont pas les codes. Donc, l'espace leur permet d'acquérir.
So the platform allows them to acquire this knowledge to avoid any bad surprises.
Elles ne vont pas prendre.
For example, they are not going to take the Eiffel Tower to Douala, Yaoundé, N'Djamena or Dakar. So they need to be immersed in the reality.
Un peu dans la réalité. Sinon,
otherwise, it can be tough for them.
Ça peut être très compliqué pour elles.
Quel regard portez-vous sur cette vague d'immigration de jeunes africains?
How do you look at this wave of immigration by young Africans, many young women, often with children, and this dangerous Mediterranean crossing to reach Europe?
Pour venir en Europe.
What can your association do both in France and Africa?
Qu'est-ce que peut faire notre association?
What can our association do? I can tell you nothing. Nothing. And why is that? Because we are not involved in the process. We have never even been consulted, which we think is a shame. When there's a talk about immigration, migrants are absent. You'll see this on all the television programs, in all the debates. So what do you expect us to do if we are excluded?
Sur le terrain, nous sensibilisons.
We try to tell them the truth about what awaits them in Europe. It means giving them the means to say no. All is not lost. You can get through this. You're not the only one in this situation. Everything is still possible.
Donc voilà une direction au lieu d'aller prendre le risque.
So here's a direction instead of taking the risk in the Mediterranean. But otherwise, officially speaking, we are not involved.
Officiel, tout ça, nous ne sommes pas impliqués.
Vous prenez prochainement la route de l'Allemagne. Est-ce que la
You'll soon be heading for Germany.
Africaine au niveau de l'Europe, est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui a une
Can the African diaspora in Europe help to accentuate this public debate?
Finalement, de ce débat public?
Oui, mais c'est justement ça ce que nous essayons.
Yes, but that's precisely what we're trying to do, to create these spaces and even invite authorities, whether from our countries of origin or host countries.
De nos pays d'origine ou des accueillants. Des plateformes au niveau européen de la
European diaspora platforms exist. We are becoming increasingly aware that we must work together.
Que nous devons nous concerter et essayer de sortir des éléments
and develop arguments to put before the decision makers.
Pour amener devant les décideurs, parce que c'est pas nous qui prenons des décisions, malheureusement.
Unfortunately, we are not the ones making the decisions, but we're not short of ideas, even if they don't consider them, because I'll tell you, for example, the situation we are in today. I started talking about it in 2006.
J'ai commencé à en parler depuis 2006, par rapport à ce que je voyais sur le terrain.
About what I was seeing on the ground. I wondered at that time if the French diplomacy in Africa saw what was happening in 2006. Today they seem to be surprised, but we are not. Thank you very much, Suzanne Bellnoun. Thank you for the invitation.